Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day, especially during this time. I hope that everyone had a happy Passover. Today is Holy Thursday. I'll talk about that a little bit in the presentation. I hope you have a good Friday and a happy Easter. All of this is very important, especially as we start to look at our own lives and kind of what's happening to our world. I think is a nice reminder to think about the important things. One of the things that I want to talk about tonight is this particular presentation that I gave. This presentation, Design Like Da Vinci, was given several years ago. I had a lot of help with it, and I want to thank Jay Shu for assisting me with this particular presentation. And it kind of has started a really nice partnership. So I just want to say thank you, Jay, for all of your help. You helped me to become a better designer, a better thinker, and a better person. Now, when we think about Da Vinci, it's a name that's almost synonymous with, as Cassini had said, genius, innovator. But he was a Renaissance man. He was a man of many talents, many skills. He was known for being an artist. He had amazing sculptures. He was a mathematician. He was a city planner. He was an engineer. And he was also a map maker. And there's an old saying in medieval times, when map makers used to go off into uncharted territory, they used to say the following thing: beyond this place, there be dragons. And tonight, what I'm going to do is talk to you about a dragon slayer in Leonardo da Vinci. And let me tell you where our story begins. It actually begins in Istanbul in the year 1502. Istanbul, we would know that as Turkey today. And at the top of the map is the Golden Horn Bay. And it's really important to the Sultan of Istanbul because he wants to have trade with the people to the north. And it's also important because this is a time where his navy is the most powerful force in the world. And a call goes out, and a strange request is made. The Sultan asks all of his scientists, as well as Leonardo da Vinci, to come up with a design for a bridge that would span the Golden Horn Bay. And it's really important to him because what he wants to do is have it to where he can have that trade, but also have it serve as a lookout tower for his navy. And so what you see here is a sketch of the Golden Horn Bay, and it's the bridge for the Golden Horn Bay by Da Vinci. And what Da Vinci says to the Sultan of Istanbul is, he says, "Sire, this is going to be a modern marvel. It'll be the tallest bridge in the world. There will be 2 lanes for traffic. There's going to be special support system underneath it so that when the tide rises and lowers, your support can increase or decrease. It's going to have a smaller, narrower arc at the top, but that's because it's stronger by building it this way. And it's going to be so tall that the tallest ship of your day can sail underneath it." And so Leonardo da Vinci sends the Golden Horn Bay letter, he sends the sketch, he sends the design, and it's instantly rejected. The Sultan's engineer look at it and they laugh at Da Vinci. There's no way the support systems will hold. There's no way that the narrow arch is going to be good enough for trade to occur the way that we need it to. It's not going to be strong enough. The Sultan would be a fool to take on this particular project. And Da Vinci runs away in shame, his head held down low. Interesting thing, as we fast forward 500 years later, Da Vinci's Golden Horn Bay sketch, which went down in history as Da Vinci's Bridge to Nowhere, rejected by the Sultan's engineer, is built in Norway 500 years later to design, and it worked perfectly. You can see a marching band crossing this bridge, no problem whatsoever. In fact, there are several of these Da Vinci bridges built all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to teach you tonight is how to design like Da Vinci, and I'm going to give you some ways when you're generating and evaluating your ideas. I'm going to give you 8 simple rules, and if you can follow these 8 simple rules, you're going to be a better thinker, a better problem solver, and a better designer. Now, one of the reasons why I like to ask the question, why Da Vinci? It's been well over 500 years, and why Da Vinci? And more specifically, why Da Vinci now? Here's something that's happening to us today. We have a plague. Da Vinci actually had plagues that he had to battle with, and he drew a sketch of a smart city in the years 1484 and 1485. There were plagues that swept over the globe, the bubonic plague, and in the city of Milan alone, over 50,000 people died during those 2 years. And what this particular sketch was trying to do is build areas where people could quarantine, where they would have a fresh water source, where they would have places where there was really good aeration and wind and daylight and sunlight, and crops could grow. All of this was built to scale. And again, this was rejected, but he did it to fight what was happening in his world, a plague. And again, I think that design thinking is one of the ways that we can get smart, and you've seen that as some of our doctors and nurses have been dealing with the plague that we call the COVID-19. So that's why Da Vinci. Da Vinci is universal, and it applies even today. My name is Brian Sullivan, and I want to give you a little bit of information about yourself, about myself. Some of you may already know me. This may be old hat, but some of the things that I'm going to share with you are things that I've been doing a little bit more recently. So I've been a user researcher for a number of years. In fact, I built the usability labs out at Sabre. This is a picture of me several years ago working on a corporate booking tool. I was a user researcher for about 15 years. I'm now the director of design strategy, and I'm happy to say that we've built a really successful design thinking program at Sabre with the help of Lauren Parr, Jay Shu, and Kayla Wren. To date, over the last 18 months, we've held over 20 executive training sessions. We've built 32 design thinking toolkits. We've had 40+ customer engagements with some of the biggest brands around, Airbnb, Four Seasons, BCD Travel, American Airlines, just about any type of travel or hotel or airline that you can imagine. We've had a lot of success, and we're in the process of creating a series of videos and mural templates because we're trying to build this to scale, and we're training people in our different global locations. To date, we've trained 1,500 of our employees, and we're continuing to train more. One of the things I'm probably most proud of is that we've built 72 research-based personas in the last 18 months. So what we've done is we've interviewed and conducted surveys and validated our personas with real end users. And let me give you an example of why that's important. We tend to think of a business traveler as being a business traveler. Well, it turns out you need to know the nuance. Not all business travelers are created alike. There's a difference between a business traveler that is a road warrior versus a VIP business traveler versus an infrequent business traveler versus a travel arranger. We have personas for all of them that we've developed. in our design thinking program. And we launched our persona library just a few months ago, and everyone really loves it. So that's just another one of the things that I've been doing lately. I've held global workshops, and you can kind of see some of the places that me or my team have been in. We've been in Brazil and Poland and China and India and Mexico and Canada and Germany and Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, England a couple of times, Poland a couple of times. We've done all of those in the last 2 years, multiple trips to these locations. And in fact, today, Lauren, Kayla, and I were doing a remote design studio session with India, and then the previous day with Poland. So we do a lot of workshops. Another thing I'm pretty proud of that people don't know, in the last 3 years is I built the accessibility program at Sabre. And what that accounted for is setting the company policy, developing a training program where we partner with dev, QA, UX, product. I had to purchase the testing tools, report progress to C-levels, and along the way, we were able to win an accessibility award. The lady that is the manager of this, her name is Seda Mauer. She's in the process of writing a book. Really proud of her. I can't wait to see her publish that. A lot of people know me for the Big Design Conference. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do that this year. It may be a virtual conference. This will be our 15th conference. I founded it with several of my friends years ago, and it turns out it's really popular. I hope you'll consider going to it. I know a lot of people that are here tonight have either heard about it, spoke at it, participated or exhibited or sponsored, and it's a lot of fun. It brings the community together. I really like our nerd booth here. I also founded the SMU User Experience Program with Jay Hsu and Preston McCulley a few years ago. We were voted a top 50 program of its type. In our second year, we're now a top 20 program. We teach design thinking, sketching, user research, design, usability. I'm a keynote author on SlideShare. This is an example of one of the slides that I've done, Pixel Perfect with Jay Hsu. This was a #1 workshop at South by Southwest in 2015. And I wrote this book, The Design Studio Method. It's used in many college programs. After presenting this particular slide deck at South by Southwest, I ended up writing this book. Jay Hsu is the illustrator in it. So enough about me. Why Da Vinci, Brian? Why in the world Da Vinci? Well, I had wrote a book or read a book by Tony Buzan called The Book of Genius. If you're looking for something to do and you got a little bit of time on your hand, you might consider looking at it, because he talks about and does these biographies of just some of the world's greatest thinkers. And it turns out the #1 thinker of all time, according to Tony Buzan, is Leonardo da Vinci. And then I read this book by Michael Gelb. This is another fantastic book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, 7 Steps to Everyday Genius. And I'll give you a really quick preview of it. Here are the 7 steps to everyday genius. Be curious, test your knowledge, improve your own experience, embrace ambiguity, paradox, and uncertainty. Don't run away from it, don't fear it. Use whole brain thinking, the right brain, the left brain, science, art, logic, emotion. Know the physical world and its attributes and its constraints, and look for those interconnections in the different systems that we make. And if you ask me, every problem solver should have these traits. So here I am around this time. I'm curious about Leonardo da Vinci, and I'm reading these 2 books, and I'm thinking about the left brain and the right brain, logic, emotion, art, science. And there's all these sketchbooks that are coming out. Again, here's some other books that you might want to look at. Back of the Napkin, Beyond Words, Understanding Comics, Sketching User Experiences. It's all talking about sketching, critiquing, and getting to that first best idea, right? there's also all of this paper at the time that's getting created. A3, A4, 4 dot, iPhone, Android, 4-cell, Zerb, 6-up sketch sheets, actual paper that's being created. So there's this resurgence, this interest in sketching, and it should always be there because that's how we usually start the best ideas, on the back of a napkin. There's all this sketching software that's out there now, right? Sketchflow, Balsamic, you might even say Mural now, and it's still being released. It's still being updated. And we have all these sketching methods. We talk about whiteboarding, sketchboarding, design critiques, write studies, design studios. This is an example of a design studio that took place at a conference that I was attending. It was an amazing thing. The guys at jewelry.com were able to redesign an entire workflow within 3 days, going from marker and paper to mock-up. It was an amazing sight to see. But when you think about it, we have to create and evaluate. We have to use both sides of our brain to generate and refine to get to that one good idea that we want to put in front of users. We rinse and repeat. And I'm reading all of this, I'm thinking back about Da Vinci, and the question that I fundamentally ask is, how as we, designers, researchers, strategists, data scientists, how can we design like Da Vinci? And so what I want to do now is talk for a moment about Da Vinci's true legacy. Now, many of you know Da Vinci for The Last Supper. And as a matter of fact, if we take a moment, tonight is Holy Thursday. This would be The Last Supper. Last night was Passover, which was a Seder meal. The Last Supper is also a Seder meal. And the reason why this particular painting is so powerful is it captures that moment in the Bible when Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," and then all hell breaks loose. And you see it here, and we'll study this in a moment. You might know Da Vinci by the Mona Lisa. She has that very interesting crown. But what I think is more interesting here is the background. I'm going to tell you a story about the history of the Mona Lisa, but more importantly, the setting that's in the background. It occurs pretty late in his life. And there's a lot of talk about the Mona Lisa and how interesting it is. But when you think of him as an artist, he wasn't very prolific. In fact, he only finished 30 paintings. So this was not a prolific artist by any stretch of the imagination. Now, these are all amazing paintings, don't get me wrong, but he was not prolific. And there are reasons for that. I would argue that rather than art, rather than the Mona Lisa, rather than The Last Supper, or Vitruvian Man, which are really his three great masterpieces, sketching is his greatest legacy. This man was a prolific sketcher. He sketched 13,000 pages in his notebooks. Now, that's a really big number, right? 13,000 pages. Let's put that into a modern day perspective. If you were to read 13,000 pages, you could read the entire Harry Potter series, the Chronicles of Narnia series, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hunger Games trilogy, the Game of Thrones series, the 9/11 report, and the NIV version of the Bible, and still have 3 pages left over. That's how prolific Da Vinci was as a sketcher. The man sketched all the time. Now, it's even greater than that, because think of it this way. If we think of it more as a visual, there was a Mashable article a few years ago that said that there are 6,000 storyboards for Brave. He could have actually by himself done at least 2 full-length storyboards for Pixar movies. Isn't that amazing? But it's even bigger than that. because underneath every painting is a sketch, and you can see that here with the Mona Lisa. In fact, there's layers and layers of it. And there's lots of sketches per page. Like on the page for Vitruvian Man, there's actually 2. On his page for sketches of shoulders, there's 7. For flowers, 20. So he has even more sketches. He didn't do just one sketch per page. 13,000 pages. Is it times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5? Don't know. Just asking the question. But I can tell you that's his greatest legacy. He was probably the most prolific sketcher in the history of man. Now, I want to get into 5 sketching secrets, and you may want to go ahead and get out your own pen and paper and sketch out a few notes. I think it's important, or you may want to just take a picture. So here are 5 sketching secrets of Leonardo da Vinci. I think that this was essentially his sketching method, and I did a lot of reading. I read some of his writing. I read a couple of biographies of Leonardo da Vinci. This is what he did. He would sketch by hand on sheets of paper, and that's very important. He could have sketched in a lot of different ways, but he used paper. And he did his initial sketches alone, and he needed to be away from people, and there's a reason why. But he would always review his sketches later with other people. He wanted feedback. He used annotations, arrows, and labels, and he did it intentionally. And that's really important. This man did not do anything unintentionally. And he would save and revisit his earlier sketches, and he did it in a very specific way that I think is amazing. And I have to tell you a couple of stories along the way. Now, use separate sheets of paper. Now, you may think that that's pretty basic, but this is the Codex Atlanticus. This has over 1,000 individual sketches in it. A codex is really a big wooden box to hold things in. It could hold animals, it could hold food, but in Da Vinci's case, he used the codex to hold his papers. And that's really important. He didn't use an iPad, right? He didn't use FieldScan. He didn't use Field Notes. He didn't use a folio. Bound pages were way too constraining for him. He used separate pages as he was generating ideas. So when you're using that right side of your brain, use separate sheets of paper and do that intentionally. Let me give you an example here. Here's a bunch of sketches from a design studio that I did several years ago. And they're just individual sheets of paper. But if we start to look at them, we can cluster them into really 4 different groups. And Da Vinci was known to do that too. He would sketch all of these different designs for the human body, or for weapons, or for bridges, or for cities. And he would do them over different time periods, and he would store them in a different codex, but he had it available to him. That's why he used separate sheets of paper, and he stored them very intentionally. Here you can see some of the sketches of just ways to fly that Da Vinci had. These were done over a 7-year period. You can tell that some of them were older, some of them were different. He had different inspiration. There's this parachute, a helicopter, a glider, and bat wings. So here's your lesson from Leonardo, your first lesson. Sketch by hand. There's no constraints. It's cheap and quick, no special skills, but do it on separate sheets of paper if possible. It's portable. You can reorganize them. You can group them and regroup them. We're using Mural right now. We have people taking sketches on different sheets of paper and uploading their images to the Mural board, and we're moving them around. Mural becomes a codex for us. The second lesson, sketching secret from Leonardo, is to do your sketches alone. Da Vinci actually dissected 10 cadavers for his over 750 sketches on human anatomy. Here's some of the drawings of the shoulder that I had mentioned earlier. Here's just a couple of sketchings of the human body. But he would sketch alone. He needed a little bit of space, right? Especially for something that's technical. You need that creative space. but you also needed to get technical accuracy. So Marcantonio del Torre was a doctor that he helped with dissecting the cadavers with, and Da Vinci would witness and participate in the dissections of the cadavers, and then he would go off alone and he would sketch, and he needed to get away from the doctor. It's also probably a little bit messy in that room, but he would do these wonderful drawings, and then he would come back and check them for technical accuracy. Da Vinci once told a story, and he told this to his biographer. He wanted to know the cause of a sweet death. So there was a friend of his, an old man. He asked the old man that when he died, if Da Vinci could dissect him, and the old man agreed. He was a very good friend of Leonardo's family. And it turns out that Da Vinci actually held the old man when he died, and after a few minutes, the doctor pronounced him dead. Da Vinci started dissecting him, and he learned the cause of a sweet death was actually cholesterol. And he only learned that by doing this study of the human anatomy with the doctor. Now, it wasn't unusual for, at this time, for artists to be interested in the human body. Michelangelo also dissected human cadavers, even though it was considered socially repugnant, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But here's the deal, sketching secret of Leonardo. Sketch alone. Give yourself that creative space. No distractions, you generate faster. It allows time for some ideas to bubble up and incubate. You can reflect and then be inspired, and you avoid groupthink, right? So that's your second sketching secret of Leonardo. The third one, though, is to review them with others. I kind of talked about that just a moment ago. Marcantonio del Torre reviewed the human anatomy sketches for accuracy, and Da Vinci was actually in the process of collecting those in a codex to publish, but he wasn't able to do it because it turned out Marcantonio del Torre died of the Black Death. He would review his sketches on weapons with generals and soldiers. Here's an example of a crossbow, a tank, and also a bridge. So remember to review together when you're using the left side of brain. After you've generated ideas, you need to have them evaluated. That's when you review together. You need someone's expertise. This is your chance to collaborate, to communicate, to validate, to check for accuracy, to gain consensus, to get alignment. That's how you can design like Da Vinci. You want to make your sketches very usable, and one of the best ways to do that is to use annotations, arrows, and labels. Da Vinci's sketches were wireframes. They're pictures with words, arrows, and labels. And as a matter of fact, if you look at this picture of a fetus, there is a picture in the center, a label on the top, annotations up and down the side, and arrows that point to key content. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wireframe. Picture in the center, label at the top, annotations on the side. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, words with pictures equal clarity, right? There's also another famous saying, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a good prototype or a good sketch is worth 1,000 meetings. And that's what I think we have here. Let's make sure to do that, right? And here we go. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a good sketch is worth 1,000 meetings. Let's make sure to do that. Make your sketches usable. So a drawing, title, description, arrows, annotations, labels, have that. When I do my design studios, even the ones in mural, I ask for this. The reason is the people that are in the room probably understand it. The people that drew it probably still know what they drew. Here's the thing. People will eventually go to sleep. They will rest. They will forget. That drawing with the title, description, arrows, annotations, and labels serves as a really good memory jogger for the people that are in the room. For the people that weren't in the room, it helps them to provide clarity. They can understand it because they can read the arrows, the annotations, and the labels. In addition to that, if you store it, Da Vinci used a codex. If you store it in a wiki, in Mural, in InVision, just in some central repository, you may have a vision board that you can draw upon later on. So that's another lesson from Leonardo. And the fifth lesson from Leonardo is to save and revisit later. Now, here's an interesting thing. When I was reading one of the biographies, there was some debate, but scholars think that Da Vinci used an early form of the Cornell method of note-taking. In the Cornell method of note-taking, there's a Q column that actually has what you might think of as keywords and summaries. And think about this, Da Vinci's flipping through these pages in a codex. He's probably going to go ahead and publish the human anatomy drawings that I'd mentioned before, or different drawings of civil engineering projects, or different drawings of weapons. This becomes a way for him to quickly index them. They're almost like tabs. And then the summaries at the bottom just become a quick overview. Again, that brief description. So you save and revisit later. And again, here are Da Vinci shortcuts. Organize them or store them. He had a Codex Atlanticus. We have plenty of digital devices that we can use. We know for a fact that he grouped his weapon sketches together, and his human anatomy sketches, and his civil engineering sketches. Technology helps us here. Here's how Jay Shu actually does his sketches. He stores them in Facebook. We can use Pinterest, Evernote, Dropbox. Anyway, we have so many ways to store it. Let's revisit them later. No work is wasted. Revisit it later. Don't throw anything out. Remember the story about the bridge from earlier on. They took his drawing and his letter to the Sultan of Istanbul, and they built it to spec 500 years later. Isn't that amazing? Think about that for a moment. It wasn't thrown out. It was stored for later. It was findable, and it was revisited, and it was built. And that's an amazing thing. Your work that you draw might get rejected. Probably will. That's okay. It's not the first, second, third version. It's the 22nd, 23rd, 43rd version of an idea. And maybe it comes 10 or 12 years later. That's why you store your work. Now, I want to talk about two things. I want to give you an idea of some rules on how to generate ideas, and then some rules to evaluate ideas. So I've told you how to sketch. I've told you why it's important to design like Da Vinci. Now let's talk about ways to be really effective when we're generating ideas. So when you're generating ideas, when you're using that right side of your brain, when you're trying to get the most out of it, do these four things for me. Strive for quantity, defer judgment, seek new combinations, and I need you to use your imagination. All four of these things are actually really hard to do. They sound simple, but you really need to be diligent and be intentional the way Da Vinci was. If you can do these four things when you're generating ideas, you can design like Da Vinci. So first off, strive for quantity. Vitruvian Man is an iconic sketch of human potential. Many of you have seen this, and maybe you didn't know where it came from, but it's actually called Vitruvian Man because it is the solution to a math problem. The Greek scholar Vitruvius had noted that a man's body could fit perfectly because of the proportions of a man inside a circle and a square, but for hundreds of years, people were baffled on how to draw that. Da Vinci comes along and, of course, uses layering, which is what any designer worth his salt will do. But he had to strive for quantity. He didn't draw just, one Vitruvian Man and he was done. He did 750 anatomy sketches before drawing Vitruvian Man. So he needed to know all those proportions. He knew it to great detail. He also dissected those cadavers. Now, remember I said he has three great masterpieces, the Mona Lisa, the Last Supper, and Vitruvian Man. And innovation scholars predict that it takes 3,000 raw ideas for one successful one. And if you think about it, the math kind of works out here. 13,000 sketches or actually pages of sketches, and 3 masterpieces. 750 anatomy sketches equaled Vitruvian Man. I would also add that he had all of those paintings. He also had the layerings within the paintings. He also dissected the cadavers. So here's your first lesson when you're generating ideas. Quantity leads to quality. Remember, Da Vinci had 13,000 pages of sketches that led to 3 masterpieces. Quantity leads to quality. But it's not enough to just strive for quantity. You also need to defer judgment. Da Vinci once said that it's easier to resist in the beginning than at the end. And I think that it's really true. And when I talk about deferring judgment, I want you to defer judgment, both positive and negative judgment. Now, for the sake of this, I'm just going to pick on one person randomly. I'm going to pick on my good friend Lena. Lena, I'm picking on you because my grandmother's name was Lena. So think of it this way. I'm picking on my grandmother, not you. But look at all of these sketches of the Last Supper. Da Vinci did a ton of them. He had Judas and Jesus problems. And this is really the way the sketch looked for about 3 years. And the interesting thing about this particular story is that, and I'll get to you here in a moment, Lena, but this is about deferring judgment. Da Vinci was terrible at it. That's why he only had 30 paintings. He was a notorious perfectionist. The Last Supper was like this for 2 years. The monk that was at the church treated artists a lot like we would treat bricklayers. And he says to Da Vinci, I really need you to get this done. The patrons here at the parish, they want to worship. They want to be able to see the Last Supper. They're curious about it. And here is what he said to the priest. He said, Sir, I'm having a really tough time figuring out the face of Jesus and Judas. And what I'm doing is I'm scouring the slums of the city to see if I can find people helping out people in need. And so that would give me an inkling as to the face of Jesus, but I'm also looking for desperate people. That would give me an idea of Judas. And the priest said to him, well, why can't you just pick any man and just go from there? And Da Vinci said, well, what I could do, sir, is I could use your face as the face of Judas. And the priest paused, reflected, and he gave him 2 more years to finish it out. But the story here is deferring judgment. It's really hard for people that are designers to defer judgment, especially when they're perfectionists, but also for people when they first observe something to defer judgment. Now, I'm going to pick on Lena for just a moment. Lena, this is what I could do if we're in a design studio, let's say with Lena and Mike and Gregory and Alicia and Jay and Lauren. This is what I might say is, oh my God, Lena, that's a terrific idea. That's great. That's neat. That's cool. That's sweet. That's number 1. That's spectacular. That's excellent. That's the best. Hey guys, stop. We don't have to do anything else. She got it right. She's number 1. Stop the presses. Hold the phone. We're done. That's all good. Now, here's what happens. That shuts Lena down from coming up with the next idea. It also shuts all of the other people in your design studio and on your team down because they don't think that they're any good. You have to defer positive judgment, but you also have to defer negative judgment. If I was to say to Lena, nope, that sucks, that blows, that's ugly. Oh my God, Lena, you need to rethink your life choices. This was such a terrible sketch. I can't believe you even showed that to us. That's going to shut Lena down. She's probably going to quit her job, probably go to HR to talk to me, but it's also going to scare the hell out of everybody else that's in the design studio and on your design team. So the point here is we have to defer judgment. Positive and negative judgment shut us down equally. if we're going to strive for quantity, we have to defer judgment. Positive judgment shuts you down, negative judgment, your own judgment. Just think of it this way. It's a sketch, it's a draft, it's a V1. We'll revisit it later. One of the interesting stories that I can tell you here is when Jay and I were building out the design thinking program at Sabre, we ended up creating 51 versions of our design strategy slides, 51. And we had to also pilot them with 15 different teams. And we continue to get feedback, and we're still updating them. It's just a sketch, it's just a draft. Design is never done. Now, here's an interesting story. Remember I said, beyond this place, there be dragons. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our dragon. If you want to generate ideas and design like Da Vinci, you need to seek new combinations. And Da Vinci has an interesting story about a pet dragon, and it kind of goes like this. Da Vinci's dad was a lawyer and was pretty well known, and around the time that Da Vinci was a teenager, and he's an aspiring artist. One of Da Vinci's father's clients comes in and asks for a dragon shield to be made, and he had heard that Da Vinci's son was an artist. So Da Vinci's dad comes up and he gives him a project, and he asks him to draw this shield. And so the story goes like this, and it was told by one of his biographers and also a friend of his, that after 3 days, his father came up to his room, and right before he comes in, he knocks on the door, and his son comes in, or he comes into his son's room, and it smells really bad. It smells like boy, you know, dirt and grime, and he's an artist, and I'm just imagining the bed isn't made up, clothes are everywhere. He's an aspiring artist, and he's got his supplies and canvases, and it's all messy. Da Vinci is in the corner. Leonardo's in the corner, and his dad says to him, son, you need to clean up your room. My God, it smells in here. It's terrible. Can you show me your progress on the dragon shield? And Leonardo goes, oh yeah, I'm done. It's in the corner over there. Let me show it to you. And so he pulls the canvas back, and his dad sees the most beautiful dragon shield that he could ever imagine. He knows that his client is going to be happy. He knows he's going to get more clients because that client's going to tell everyone else how great Leonardo did with the dragon shield. And his dad is so proud of his son. He says, Leonardo, how did you produce this shield? What did you do? And he goes, well, Dad, I was out in the garden and I actually found a dragon. And his dad goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, well, let me show you over here. I have it in this codex. So he goes over to the codex, and the codex, again, it's a wooden box. It's got some holes in it, and Leonardo opens it up. And inside of this codex, there's this really small creature. His dad has to take a second look at it, and he's not really sure what's going on. And he looks over at his son, and Leonardo smiles, and he goes, do you want to see him move? I've trained him. And his dad goes, sure. And Leonardo does this, snaps his hands. And the creature moved. Here's what happened. New combinations. Leonardo had created a pet dragon by gluing other animal parts to a lizard. He added fish scales, bat ears. He even painted the lizard. He added wings from a bat, and he put a contraption underneath it so that when the lizard walked, it looked like the wings were trying to flap. This was known as Leonardo's pet dragon. The whole idea here, though, is new combinations. This kind of explains why Leonardo's room smelled bad, too. Now, he was known to have this dragon and walk this dragon around the streets of Milan. Here's an example of just putting other things to another use. These are just blocks of wood to build a movable bridge. This is one of the weapons that Leonardo wanted soldiers to have so that they could quickly move around obstacles. Here is the world's first automobile. It's made out of spare parts. I will also say that it is the first green car, no gasoline, right? It is steering column, rack and pinions, wheels, cranks, springs. You could crank this bad boy up and it would glide 45 feet. There wasn't a steering wheel or a chair. Maybe that was going to be MVP number 2, but it is the world's first automobile. But he just used the existing technology of the day to create a new combination. So here's your other lesson from Leonardo. When you're generating ideas, it's not enough to strive for quantity. It's not enough to defer judgment. Look for new combinations and look hard. Put old things to a new use. Maybe you make an element bigger or smaller. Maybe you reverse it. But there are other things that you can do with different technology. And it's an amazing time that we live today. Think of all of the platforms, machine learning, AI, chatbots, computers, sensors. All of this technology is now converging at a very interesting time where we can come up with more combinations. We can design like DaVinci because we probably have more tools than DaVinci. The fourth thing that you need to do when you're generating ideas to design like DaVinci is to use your imagination. And Da Vinci once said, "Why does the eye see a thing more clearly in dreams than the imagination when awake?" And when you think about it, a lot of it is you kind of put away your daily stresses and your mind is able to just freely roam and make different associations. And almost anything is impossible in your dreams, but then reality hits as soon as you wake up. But I need you to really strive to use your imagination, right? Generating and refining ideas, we all know about this, but we all tend to stay in the common response zone. We need to try to get out of the common response zone. So remember, Da Vinci made a lot of drawings, and so here is at least 6 sketches of flying machines. And it turned out that this particular glider test, it actually worked in 2006. These particular scientists, they were, I think, from New Zealand. This Da Vinci glider flew from material that was available at the time of Da Vinci. But here's the point. If you're going to generate ideas and use your imagination, you have to avoid the common response zone. Like I said before, it's not the first, second, third, fourth. It's the 22nd, 23rd, 24th. That's why you strive for quantity. More ideas force you to use your imagination. You expire the common response zone after 5 or 6 of your first ideas. Then you let things incubate, and then you revisit with a new perspective, and then you might team up with other people. And that's how you can generate ideas like Da Vinci. Strive for quantity, defer judgment, positive and negative, seek new combinations, get out of the common response zone, and use your imagination. Now, it's not enough to just generate ideas. We also need to refine them and evaluate them. So when we're using our left brain, here is what I want you to do. Do these 4 things and you'll start to design like Da Vinci. Use positive judgment first when you see new ideas. Consider the novelty of every single idea that you see. Stay focused, and when needed, you're going to need to redirect yourself, because this is really hard work to design like Da Vinci. The first thing that you need to do is use positive judgment. The greatest deception men suffer from is their own opinions, said Da Vinci. And I'm thinking that he probably thought this about the engineers that rejected his bridge. But use positive judgment first. We have 65,000 thoughts per day, according to neuroscientists, and 65% of them are negative, roughly 42,000. That's called negative self-speak. I'm too fat, I'm too slow, my idea is terrible, no one's going to like it, this is ugly, this is bad, no one will buy this. We just tend to talk very negatively to ourselves, but also whenever we see a new idea. We also know that Da Vinci struggled personally. Remember the story of the Last Supper? It took well over 2 years to finish this. Remember how I said that using negative judgment can shut you down, especially perfectionists? So here's what you need to do. Whenever you start to see a new idea, when you're presented with something new, I tell people to use positive judgment first. And it's really hard because negative judgment's almost a reflex, right? 65,000 thoughts per day and 42,000 of them are negative. You need to explore the value and benefit of a potential idea. Try to avoid the natural tendency to think negatively. And it's hard to do, especially when you see a new idea. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. You're going to see some ideas that you're going to think this person is crazy. And a lot of people used to think that some ideas were super crazy. In fact, who would have thought that wearing a bandana up to a bank would be socially acceptable until this particular plague came out, right? We have to consider the novelty, the context, the timing. Da Vinci said that there are 3 classes of people: those who see, but only when they're shown, and those who do not see. And again, I think that we probably all know these type of people in our work. The people who are able to see, those are the people that can consider the novelty of a potential idea. That's where we want to be. The city of Venice once called one of Da Vinci's inventions totally impractical. Da Vinci had actually built a movable dam, and you could move the dam so that water would flow. I'm sorry, not a movable dam. It was a movable barrier. It used to be that Venice would flood. It's known for flooding. And then after the flooding, raiders would come in and they would raid the city and try to take things because people would abandon the city. Well, putting up this portable barrier that allowed water to come through and not become a dike or a dam, it kept people out, but it didn't keep the water in. To me, it seems like a very practical idea. They didn't consider the novelty and benefit of a potential idea. Here's Pope Leo X. He banned autopsies when Michelangelo and Da Vinci were dissecting cadavers, and it was outlawed by the Pope because it was seen as socially repugnant. Da Vinci wasn't able to complete his work on the study of the human body for 2 reasons. The Black Death came and killed off Marcantonio del Torre, and Pope Leo X banned these autopsies, so he wasn't able to finish his work. He didn't consider the novelty and potential benefit to mankind of this type of work. And imagine it, they're going through plagues at this time, and these are things that could actually help modern medicine. I might even make the argument that this threw modern medicine back hundreds of years because we didn't have this work published. Remember, the Sultan rejected his bridge in the first story that I told you. Jared Spool calls this the executive seagull maneuver, swoop and poop. There's no way this bridge will work. The arc is too high, right? That's what the engineers had said. It worked perfectly 500 years later. Try to avoid swoop and poop, that natural tendency to think negatively. Don't dismiss the novelty of an idea. Novel ideas might lead to new inventions, new business processes, new models, new ways of thinking about things. And understand this, many of Leonardo's ideas were rejected. Your idea may just be ahead of its time. If you save that work, like I told you earlier, you might revisit it 10 or 12 years later, and that can become the next big thing. Now, it's really hard to design like Da Vinci, especially when you're evaluating ideas. Again, use positive judgment first, consider the novelty of a potential idea. You got to stay focused. This is hard work. You have to be intentional. Da Vinci once said this: as every divided kingdom falls, so does every mind divided between many studies. It confounds and saps itself. And think about that. It's so easy to get distracted these days. Da Vinci himself was that way. He was a notorious perfectionist and procrastinator. If there's one thing that I can wish you, I wish you to be a finisher. It's better to finish things than to start things. Da Vinci was notorious at starting things. He was terrible at finishing them. So what I like to do is take breaks from time to time. I'm doing a lot of remote design studios now. So we do virtual coffee breaks. We have on time. We have online time. We have offline time. We check in on people. We do things like that. But if you can structure your day with a break, a lunch, a break, go for a walk, refocus, unplug, get away from the news, get away from social media, it helps you to stay focused so that you can be a better designer and you can be a better thinker and you live a healthier life. Now, there's a concept when I was doing all the reading by the biographers. They said that this is known as the Da Vinci dilemma. This was a man of many talents and not enough time. And you can see a mathematician, scientist, anatomist, strategist, civil engineer. He just had so many different talents. It was hard for him to get focused because he got easily distracted. We can too, especially with every new tool, every new platform, every new language, all the social media that's just bombarding us all of the time, all of the big media. There's just a lot of things that are easy to forget the things that are important in life. And this is a really sad story here. Da Vinci felt bad. He felt like he had wasted his talents. He said, and it wasn't the last thing he said, but one of them, I have offended God and mankind because my work didn't reach the quality that it should have. Spoken like a true perfectionist, right? It was a deathbed confession. He didn't get enough work done. Now, he had it all saved in the different codexes for us to, admire years later. But I think he's thinking about all of the sketches that he had left behind and the work that he had left unfinished. So be sure to stay focused on what's important. Try to be a finisher. And it's hard to do that. You have to take breaks, refocus. Try to focus on one thing at a time. Don't procrastinate, and understand that perfectionism kills productivity. Remember, I said that Jay and I had done 51 versions of the slides, and we got tired of renaming them, reversioning them. So we just started over again. I think we're on version 16 or 17. Occasionally, you are going to have to redirect yourself, and you're going to get into situations that require you to navigate some shark-infested waters, because if you're going to get anything done, you have to deal with people. Now, I want to tell you a story about Leonardo da Vinci struggling with having to redirect himself. The man that's on the right is a gentleman by the name of Caesar Borgia, and the man on the left is Machiavelli, known for The Prince. Let me tell you a little bit of information about each one of them. Caesar Borgia, son of a pope, he was a cardinal by the age of 17. Imagine that. That was nepotism at its worst. He's known to have killed his brother. In fact, he bragged about it. He was a dictator in his own land. He survived poisoning multiple times. He was known to have slaughtered many of his followers, died in war, and for a short time, towards the end of Da Vinci's life, he was a patron of Leonardo da Vinci. Machiavelli was a politician for 14 years. He was the head of the Florence militia, and he wrote The Prince. If you haven't read that book, here's just a few quotes from it. The ends justify the means. It's better to be feared than loved. Too much freedom can lead to the soul's decay. Not a nice guy. Here's the issue. Caesar Borgia was Machiavelli's prince. And what you have is Caesar Borgia, a madman, and his cheerleader, Machiavelli, egging him on to do more, to poison, to kill people, to take a strong hand in his lands. And caught between it is Leonardo da Vinci. If you ever think, ladies and gentlemen, that you have to deal with office politics or struggle with a tough situation, think again. So look at these shark-infested waters that Da Vinci had to navigate. There's a story towards the end of Da Vinci's career, and in fact, it's actually happens during the time of Caesar Borgia. It turns out that Borgia wanted to invite a bunch of his friends over, and so he brought in all of the dukes and some of the cardinals, and he invited them over for lunch. And he said, "We need to have a confab. Let's have a talk." And what he did was he cut off all of their heads, he put them on spires and marched them around the kingdom. He wanted to let people know who was boss. And in fact, Machiavelli thought that this was a wonderful thing to do, and he makes it universal by publishing that as the classic example of what a strong prince would do in his book. Now, Paul Strathern, one of the biographers of Da Vinci, said that he suffered a profound psychological change as a result of this. He was terrified. He had nightmares. In fact, he froze. And it's around this time that Da Vinci is having to build these maps, and he's having to build just ways in which to produce some work for Borgia that it will be seen in a positive light, because Da Vinci didn't want to give him any offensive weapons. He had a bunch of weapons stored up in the Codex Atlanticus. But one of the things that he did do was he gave a drawing of Borgia's fortress. It had, in fact, around this time, it was considered to be impenetrable. It had rounded walls to counter the direct impact of a cannonball. Interior walls led to fortified positions. There were storage places and sniper positions. Anyway, he gave this to Borgia. Borgia absolutely loved it. He designed a movable bridge. I talked about that a little bit earlier. But Da Vinci said that he had had a grotesque error in partnering up and accepting Borgia as his patron. And I think he's imagining what Borgia would have done with a glider, a crossbow, a tank, a cluster bomb, machine gun, a helicopter, and a hand-cranked catapult, all of which were designs that Da Vinci had hidden away in the Codex Atlanticus. So he redirected his work. You have to do that from time to time. He built a map of Milan. I told you about the smart city earlier, a map of Imola, the headometer. The headometer is still used today by people that are mapping out how far locations are on the street. The movable bridge, an improved ladder, a fortress redesign. But what he said was, "I will not publish or divulge such things because of the evil nature of men." So he hid away all of those weapons, and he hid away a bunch of great inventions because he was afraid of the evil nature of men. He stored them in the Codex Atlanticus. That's where most of the military sketches were. These were the final words of the greatest thinker of all time, according to most historians. "I have wasted my hours." I want you to think about that. I have wasted my hours. It's a sad story, but I don't think that he did. What the lesson to learn here is there's no way to avoid politics. You can't. You just kind of have to navigate them as best you can. What I would suggest you do is maintain your own values. I think Da Vinci did that. I think he did it really well. And know that design can be done under great duress. And again, Da Vinci had Borgia and Machiavelli. It doesn't get any worse than that. Redirect yourself to positive things. You can do good work under terrible situations. So let me give you my final thoughts, and we'll wrap up, and I'll pitch it back to Cassini. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a good sketch is worth 1,000 meetings. That's why I first got interested in Da Vinci. Here are the 5 sketching secrets of Leonardo da Vinci. Sketch by hand, use separate sheets of paper, do your initial sketches alone so that you have that creative space. You can review them later with others for technical accuracy, completeness. Use annotations, arrows, and labels to make them more usable. You can save and revisit them at any other time. Try to use whole brain thinking, the left brain and the right brain. When you're using the right brain, strive for quantity. Quantity leads to quality. Deferred judgment, positive and negative judgment, shuts you down equally. Da Vinci suffered from this because he was a stubborn perfectionist. Seek new combinations. Da Vinci was actually really good at that. Use your imagination. Get out of the common response zone. It's not the first, second, third, fourth idea. Fifth, sixth, seventh. That's why you need to sketch a lot. When you're using your left brain and you want to design like Da Vinci, use positive judgment first. Remember, we tend to think negatively naturally. 65,000 thoughts a day, 42,000 of them were negative. Negative self-speak. Try to avoid it. Use positive judgment first. Consider the novelty. What is the potential benefit and value of a new idea? Stay focused. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to just settle for that second or third idea. Don't do that. Get out of the common response zone. And sometimes, from time to time, you have to redirect yourself. And if you can do these 8 things, I think that you'll be well on your way to designing like Da Vinci. I really appreciate everyone's attention tonight. And thanks for sticking in there. I'm going to turn it back over to Cassini.